All right, here we go. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to give it probably a minute or so, let some people start trickling in, coming off a holiday weekend. Everyone's clearing out their inboxes and trying to get caught up. So we'll just give it a minute or two before we jump in. Okay, if you wouldn't mind putting where you're calling in from in the chat, would love to see where everyone's from. Hope everyone had a good Labor Day weekend.
Definitely.
Charleston.
I've heard of it.
All right, well, we will go ahead and get started. Let me share my screen. Okay, all good. Can you see my screen? Also the deck? All good. Thanks. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name's Carrie. I will be your host today for from zero marketing budget to 350 units, unlocking growth through sales and revenue management. Today, our webinar is brought to you by PriceLabs. We are a dynamic pricing platform for short-term rentals, and also Feather, a powerful property management system created using real world experience from former property managers. Absolutely love that. A couple of housekeeping will run for about 30 minutes, and then we will follow up with some time for a Q&A. If you have questions, please do put them in the Q&A box rather than the chat. This will allow it, one, to come through on the recording, but also lets us kind of keep track of the questions, make sure we can get to them. We'll keep an eye, and as we can, bring them up throughout the session. But like I said, at the end, we'll save some time to go through as many as we can. Just letting you all know, I'll go over this a little bit more in detail at the end, but anyone joining us today, we do have a special offer for first-time PriceLabs users. So I'll go over the details on that, so stay tuned, but we do have something special for you all. So my name is Carrie, as I said. I'm a solutions consultant here at PriceLabs. I am based out of Savannah, Georgia, and primarily work with larger PMs on the East Coast. I work with our customers, assist them in managing their listings, revenue management strategies within their account. Prior to PriceLabs, I was a property manager for a large company based out of Tybee Island. So this makes me super excited because my co-host here today has kind of a similar path coming from the PM side and now on that tech and vendor side of the industry. So I am joined here today by Quinn from Feather. Hi, Quinn. Good to see you again.
Thank you for hosting us today. Really appreciate it. Excited to
Yeah,
join today's session.
yeah. Can you please introduce yourself? Tell us what your role is at Feather, a bit about your background, and kind of how you got into this wonderful STR world.
Absolutely. So again, I'm Quinn Foster. I'm based here in Charleston, South Carolina, just up the road from Cary and Savannah. I have been in the property management space for a little over 10 years. I got involved with a company called StayDuvet with my two business partners back in 2015, where I was the former chief revenue officer. And in our experiences of building that company, scaling to 350 plus units, and just recently going through a successful acquisition, we are now in the process of taking our proprietary property management system, Feather, to market, to go sell to like-minded managers that are here on the call today. Our goal is to bring best practices and some of the success that we were able to see at Duvet to like-minded managers around the entire country. So in an industry right now where it's becoming highly professionalized, insanely quick, with both homeowner and guest expectations um, rising every day, we want to come in and lead with best practices and empower the managers through our experiences, not just delivering a platform, but really being almost like a white glove level, high touch level property management assistant and consultant.
Awesome, awesome. And I feel like super important specifically that you come from that world because you have a very good understanding of the needs, the opportunities, the harder areas. So you really have that real life experience to kind of bring into your conversations with people as well. It's not just working on assumptions on what people do day to day, but truly knowing what they are going through.
Definitely. Started as a manager and worked into the tech side of the business, versus I feel like a lot of the other folks are system first and trying to interpret property management needs and wants. So definitely a fresh approach, and very excited to get introduced to as many people as possible to show them what we're all about.
Cool. Well, I do have a couple customers I already work with that have PriceLabs and use Feather, and they're very happy. So I'm happy to report that.
Glad to hear it.
Okay, so we're gonna kind of just dive right in. So like you said, prior to Feather, you were with StayDuvet.
Correct.
Scaled that business to exceed over 350 listings. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes. And what a wild story it was.
I was gonna
Um,
say that is a massive achievement. And anyone that has added even 5 listings to their portfolio knows how difficult that can be and how time consuming that can be. Can you tell us kind of how did that start? Did you sit down and go, all right, guys, this is it. Like clear your calendars.
quickly as possible. No, didn't really start that way. It started as more of as a side hustle. Me and my business partners were really just kind of friends at the time. We were managing some of our own inventory and friends of friends properties. But out of the three of us, I was the only one who didn't have access to my own property to rent out and partake in some of that cash flow. So I had to basically bring my cold calling capabilities from a couple of other positions I had before we got involved with Duvet, to dial for dollars. So I'd say I probably made anywhere from 300 to 400 cold calls. And I had one guy that said that he wanted to get lunch with us. And we ended up going to lunch, doing the pitch. We did it pretty well. And he ended up telling us at the end of lunch that he had 12 properties that he wanted to give us. So at that point in time, the side hustle for everybody very much became a real company. And so now that forced us to really, buckle down and start saying, what's the core of our business? What are we going to be focused on at StayDuvet? Charleston at that point in time was very much kind of like a sleepy town. Vacation rentals were certainly a thing, but it just wasn't really put on the pedestal that they are today. It wasn't nearly as competitive. It was just list it, see if it rents. And if it does, great. If it doesn't, it is what it is. So what we really focused on and held true was really bringing the hotel experience to the home and focusing on revenue management. So we wanted guests to have a 5-star experience, same way they would at a hotel. But also for the homeowners, we just really wanted to make them as much money as possible because we knew that the opportunity was certainly there. So I ran the revenue management, specifically, and really started to dial in processes and try to get engaged with sales pitches as much as possible. So if there was ever an opportunity to, go on a pitch and, interact with both, how my business partner Taylor was, having a dialogue and really trying to present ourselves as a viable candidate. I also wanted to see how I could bring data into the room so we could really supercharge any kind of reinvestments that need to be made back into the property. Again, no one was really focused on either aspects of those businesses, which is ultimately what fueled our ability to get to over 200 properties in the first 3 years of being in business. Fast forward to 2018, 2019, a few years down the road, we ended up losing about 20% of our inventory overnight due to legislation, which I know, as I'm sure plenty of people on this call is constantly battling with still, or has some sort of experience doing it in the past. But we saw that as an opportunity to kind of become the gold star of management and not continuing to manage illegal rentals. And now we knew exactly what was a legal rental and what wasn't a legal rental anymore. So our sales team could really start get to work. By 2021, we were over 300 plus properties, and we really started operating as an enterprise level company. And during that journey, we started our own cleaning business. We opened up a 6,000 square foot laundry facility, and building out our own property management system along the way. We chose to build our own PMS due to the lack of affordable options in the market that were pre-COVID. And the options that we did have were either just not cost efficient enough, or it just didn't do what we really, at the end of the day, needed it to do. We would like to think about our operations were done by way of task management. We needed a way to marry those tasks with revenue and performance. And we needed, the horsepower or the robust capabilities to generate powerful reports. And that is purely the core focus of Feather, is being able to capitalize all three of those in a single tech stack, and not just having a management system that will integrate with third-party platforms to try to somewhat accomplish those tasks for them or run their business.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times in like my career in PM where I was working with a tech, I've been in the industry for over 10 years. It's a fairly young industry. And so technology has changed so greatly over the years. And through that, there are, a lot of hits, a lot of misses, but there were a lot of times where I was like, this feels like it was designed by someone that thinks they know what I do, but they've never actually had to use it in the day to day. And so for you guys very early on to see that and go, okay, we're growing, what we're doing now is working. Like, we need a tool that works with us and that we're not just trying to do a bunch of workarounds, because what a total pain and time suck that can be.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah. Cool. So you had mentioned that you tried to be really involved in that sales process and kind of bringing that data into that sales process. Can you kind of talk to me about how you got sales and revenue management to work hand in hand when you have a salesperson and you have a revenue management person? Those are two different personalities, right? Two
Really
different skill
worlds.
sets.
Yeah.
So how did you kind of get those two things to work together?
Yeah, it was really just being willing to partake in the sales process, really understanding, like, how are you starting these conversations? What's being discussed during these conversations, and how can we start bringing data into this pitch? As a sales guy, I can totally, understand how difficult and intimidating it can be to walk into somebody's home and, kind of just give them sometimes what would be the ugly truth. It might require suggesting reinvesting into their property, and, maybe they're coming to you because of the reason they aren't making enough money, whether they're self-managing or with one of the competitors that they're working with just isn't really capitalizing off of, solid cash flow. So where I wanted to have my sales guy to have some tackling fuel going into those pitches was, hey, listen, we're going to go into this. We're more than likely going to have some sort of a big ask to have them double down or reinvest back into the property to really get up to our brand standard that we would hold ourselves accountable to. So how can we make it a much easier conversation? How can we let the data kind of speak for itself and help justify the position that we take? That was a little bit self-serving to the point where, again, having a brand standard and really kind of focus like on luxury rentals, but those luxury rentals are generally what would yield the 5-star guest experiences, and 5 stars turns into, more inquiries, more bookings. And as long as the homeowner is happy and you're setting goals and you're reaching those goals, that was my motivation to see how I could really assist the sales process and make it as seamless as possible, but really having an undertone of being data driven.
Mhm. You mentioned being data driven. At what point were you did PriceLabs come into kind of your daily use? What areas, like what kind of data specifically were you sharing with homeowners? And I ask because I know that there's the homeowners that are very savvy, that you can give them all of the data, they can interpret it, they know exactly what you're talking about. We have the homeowners that maybe think they're savvy until you give them the data, and then
There's a lot more of those.
yeah, it's a little overwhelming. And then there are the homeowners that truly their day to day is not spent looking at graphs and charts and things like that. And so it's hard for them to be able to digest all of that information. They also could be very just emotional homeowners where it's just that home is, great grandma's home. And, you have to kind of set realistic expectations for them. So how did you kind of manage those different personalities with the data as well? I guess two-part question. Sorry about that.
Well, at the end of the day, know your audience, and that's what the sales guy is supposed to do, right? So I would always get some sort of a background story on, who were we pitching, what was the caliber of the pitch going to be, and almost even having like a play-by-play of, how are we really going to start to win this person over? And so where I would really kind of follow the lead in the sense of, hey, here's the caliber of the new client that we're going to, here's who he's currently working with, or here is how he or she is currently performing. That's where I would come in and say, either, wow, this is a massive opportunity because they're totally being undersold, or, hey, yeah, there's definitely some potential there. Maybe they're a little too hands-on with their revenue management or not hands-on enough. And then we would just curate and kind of, develop the pitch with however that conversation went. But, for me specifically in the revenue management world, relative to the data that I was bringing to the table, I would always hold myself accountable to, my rule of three. And that rule of three was make sure that you have at least 3 data points to hold yourself and your data accountable. So, my first question I would ask anybody who's involved with revenue management at their company is, what is the caliber of your own data? How do you access it? Is it easily accessible, or is there some sort of a gatekeeper in your office that must report on this information for you? At Duvet specifically, our pitch and our onboarding processes required some sort of like revenue projection or goal setting exercise just to get it into our system. These goals would not only set the expectations for our new homeowners, but it also served as the foundation for the forecasting for the company's annual revenue expectations if we ended up closing the business. The easier the data was to access, the more consistently our team could stay disciplined in following through on these processes. And this mindset ultimately led us to build the dedicated revenue and performance module within Feather, giving us ourselves, the sales team, and any other authorized personnel seamless access to both high-level insights and detailed visibility into the company's performance and pacing. This significantly empowered the sales team to act quickly while presenting to a new potential client, and revenue discussions involved in whatever pitch was being made. So that's obviously your own data, right? Making it accessible and understanding the caliber of it. But the next is get a third-party non-bias data set. And for me, mine was always PriceLabs. And PriceLabs was actually the first integration that we did with Feather in order to stay as nimble as we possibly could with our revenue management strategies inside of Feather and all the OTAs and direct bookings that we were bringing in at that time. But PriceLabs ultimately was the one hosting all of our rates and discounting strategies. It served as the basis for our competitor mapping. It empowered us to view market insights and research, to have visibility on things that Feather couldn't necessarily have visibility on. For example, competitor cleaning fees, or the most commonly booked amenities, market booking windows. All of these are examples of extremely important things to pay attention to and helps dictate revenue expectations and positioning. So first, your own data. Second, some sort of third party. And then third, just to hold everything accountable and to draw the full picture, get another third party comparative to hold all of the other data comparable. So this is purely to get one more opinion on all things considered and is used to merely poke holes in the conclusions you're trying to draw. This can be something like, we're also directly integrated with key data or any of the other OTA market insight dashboards that you might list your listings on. I'm sure they give you some sort of booking window, occupancy, and ADR feedback and suggestions in order to remain competitive. But taking that to heart and holding your own data and your pricing or your dynamic pricing partner accountable is something that would really make sure that whatever kind of strategy that I was trying to deploy to the sales team or position the sales team to be successful going into a new pitch, it just made sure that our thesis going into that pitch was significantly tried and true.
And so you mentioned working with PriceLabs. So I imagine the market dashboards was something that you spent a lot
Absolutely.
of time in. Our revenue estimator, was that something that was launched when you were doing
That was
this?
huge. So generally speaking, I would go into our dashboard first and foremost, get my comparable properties that were within my own portfolio, and then I would bring it over to PriceLabs to make sure that whatever data that I was getting ready to present from my own portfolio was truly how the rest of the market was comparing. Everybody knows that, just because, year over year performance might show that a property is supposed to make $100,000 in a year, unless you really start digging through the calendar tape and identifying maybe some potential missed opportunities by way of, maintenance or work order holds or blocks on the calendars or owner blocks, might have potentially left some additional money that's on the table. So using the rental projector, that would really just make sure that however my property was performing and I chose as my comparable, that it was actually performing in line with the rest of the market and not just my portfolio.
Yeah. And I like how you said for like specifically making sure that it's comparable, because being able to, compare just a 3-bedroom downtown with another 3-bedroom downtown, that doesn't mean it's comparable, but being able to filter it out based on, okay, but I know that we operate in, 4.8 star reviews and above. So I only want to look at those in particular. And being able to kind of filter that down so you truly are matching apples to apples, which is all something that you can do in PriceLabs revenue estimator. You can filter based on reviews, occupancy rates, all that good stuff. All right, moving right along. One other thing that you did mention that I liked was, we talk about getting homeowners and signing them, but it's also about retaining them.
Definitely.
And so making sure that the communication with your own homeowners stays at the same level as the communication that you had when you brought them on. What can you explain kind of what your team standard was on like ongoing communication and how you use data in that communication with homeowners? Maybe it was a year that was like a little bit down, but you guys were still up. Like, how are you communicating that, and what kind of data are you presenting to homeowners so that they understand they're still being very successful?
Yeah. So at our company, we would always hold ourselves accountable to, at least some sort of a conversation with the homeowner, whether they were performing well or maybe underperforming, hopefully like on a quarterly basis. And so that quarterly meeting would allow us to, one, continue to have some sort of rapport with the homeowner. We're asking for the meeting. They're not the ones that are asking for it. So always having something to look forward to. It was something that just kind of, again, held ourselves accountable, but kind of made sure that it would instill some sort of trust with the homeowner that, we wanted to stay ahead of something if it was, underperformance, or if they're overperforming, letting them know, just that, and, maybe kind of alluding to how we can potentially even, increase their earnings with other investment into the property. But just building that type of rapport and regularly being in touch with the homeowner is something that I think is definitely undervalued. Don't wait for them to come ask for the conversation. Just stay ahead of it. I'm not sure if people try to make revenue performance regularly available in the form of some sort of dashboard or reports to the homeowners, not just the month end or quarterly statements, having some sort of revenue dashboard that they can log into to watch their own pacing and their own performance, and then feeding them, whether it's monthly, weekly, or quarterly, newsletters to understand market conditions. It really helps them kind of draw conclusions and make comparisons about their own performance compared to the rest of the market. So it just makes any of those conversations a lot easier whenever they do happen.
Yeah, I love that. Like at minimum, a quarterly reach out. I think the value in doing that. And not only a lot of people are, so that's just another way to kind of set yourself apart. We are gonna pivot a little bit into some market data, but before we did, I just wanted to ask, a lot of our attendees are kind of asking, how do you attract and keep owners, specifically without a big budget? Like, what is the kind of the most important alignment between sales and revenue management that makes it possible, but specifically without the big budget?
Definitely. So my business partner, Taylor, who couldn't be on the call today, his forte was providing tremendous value add in the sense of how to elevate the appearance and the feel of the home. Like, how does the home feel? Do you feel warm and fuzzy? Does it feel cold and dark? He's absolutely remarkable at turning a house into a home. And generally speaking, some of those homeowners were first-time vacation rental owners, and the products we were introduced to were generally bare bones. So, Taylor's entire pitch was, here's what we need to do to elevate the guest experience and make this house truly a 5-star vacation rental. Those conversations were mostly around upfront investment into furniture, design, amenities, and anything else that would help differentiate the home from the rest of the market to drive value from a marketing perspective. But these property enhancements would require upfront capital, which is sometimes a very touchy subject whenever you're trying to broach it with somebody you're meeting generally for the first time. That's where the revenue projections would come in. So me being able to support Taylor's statements and property enhancements that if you invest X into the property, you can comfortably count on Y as a return on your investment. That truly helps set the tone for the homeowner to realize they're working with an actual professional within the space. So this would help our win rate in multiple different facets, but this type of approach would just largely create a big sense of credibility that we were not only the professionals within the space and of course in our market, but it presents the new perspective that clients at StayDuvet, ourselves, we're always being held accountable. So put yourself in a position where you can potentially flip the script and not have a homeowner when you're going into a sales pitch. Are they going to work with you? Or how can I get this homeowner to work with me? Put it in a position of, now I want the homeowner to wonder how they can work with us and be in our program.
Yeah. And such important conversations to have, right? Because one individual homeowner can have a very large impact on the overall standard of your whole company or the overall reviews of your whole company. So it is on you, as the property manager, to make sure if you're promising X to this homeowner that you've got all the listings that are going to allow you to do that, and not, have a couple that maybe are dragging down the reviews of everyone kind of. All right, I'm going to pivot a little bit. We're going to, I know we're running out of time. I just got so wrapped up in everything you were saying. So I'm going to go into some market data and just kind of show, here's the data that you were using, but then also once you get the homeowners in, how you can actually use this data to then make some, to set your strategy, create your strategy, set your strategy so that you're delivering on the promises that you made. So we're kind of looking specifically at the Southeast states here. This is all information that we pulled from our market dashboards in PriceLabs. But overall occupancy year over year has been kind of pacing about the same. This is nice because it allows you to kind of to set expectations, right? If pacing is about the same, where you can end up, so you're not making false promises to homeowners. It also helps you know where you can go with your rates. And again, just setting better expectations, setting realistic goals. Now, while occupancy has on average been staying about the same, ADR is expected to increase by about 7%. So knowing that you can go a little bit higher with your rates, and again, with your goal setting, just knowing and being a little bit more accurate. Our booking window, of course, everyone kind of has seen a shrinking booking window. It makes everyone a little bit nervous, right? And especially if you see those, we're saying, okay, you can increase your ADR, but if your booking window is shrinking, a lot of people get nervous. If they're not aware of this data, they're dropping their rates too soon. If you want to take advantage of that slight increase in overall ADR, you have to know what your booking windows are. And just knowing, don't drop your rates too soon, because the reservations are going to come. They're just not going to come as soon as you like. I also like knowing this data because we've all had the homeowner conversation where the homeowners are like, this same time last year, I had X amount on the books.
Not an easy conversation to have, but partake in a race to the bottom. That's for sure.
Yep, exactly. And then we've got our length of stay. So length of stay for the summer months on average has stayed about the same. April, there was a little bit of a shift, but if you remember, Easter was much later. So that kind of could be the cause of that. But it's not always about revenue. It's also about your length of stay, and knowing when to have those conversations. I know I left the PM world a year and a half ago, and I still had homeowners that were like clinging to the 7-night Saturday to Saturday minimum with like a death grip that we just could not get them to release. And so just having that data and knowing what to do with it. So how could a manager use PriceLabs to turn this market data into a confident pricing strategy? Understanding your seasonal trends. Of course, you want to make the most out of your peak season, but also knowing how to be strategic in your shoulder season. So it's not all about, a lot of times people don't have a problem filling up their peak season calendar, but it's their shoulder season that they have a little bit more difficulty with. Having this data so you know exactly what kind of settings you need in order to be successful. Setting your benchmarks. So of course, occupancy in your off season is going to be low, but setting expectations of what actually is successful is important. So occupancy may be low, but your goal is to capture what little demand is there. So if you're sitting at a 15% occupancy, but the market is only at a 10%, well, you're already 5% higher than that. So having that data, again, fuels those conversations. And then conversations regarding minimum and maximum. If you've had homeowners that maybe it's an emotional attachment to their property where they never want to go below $300 a night. And you're like, that's fine, I can do that. And PriceLabs very easily helps you set that up. But if you want to really get bookings for this month, we're going to have to be at 275. It's going to make you so much more overall. But just, again, being able to have those conversations and have the data so that you can't argue with data, right? It's there. I mean, you can, but so we are over time already. Let's wrap things up. Quinn, if you could, what is like one takeaway that you would give to the audience that they could right now with that zero marketing budget? Like, what would you have them start doing now to start kind of building those relationships and hopefully preparing for 2026 and having a lot more properties to manage?
Definitely. Dial in your processes and hold yourself accountable. The accountability is multifaceted and not always easy to uphold, but, create a brand for yourself. That brand comes with a reputation, and, let your work speak for yourself. Back it up with the consistency and integrity that that you're capable of, and the rest will work itself out.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate all of your insights. Thanks for spending your time. I did want to let all of our attendees know, if you have not already, you can sign up for PriceLabs. you get a 30-day free trial. So you can use us at no cost. You don't even have to put a credit card in to start using us. And then if you sign up with the code FEATHERPL 2025, you will get 15% off your first 3 months after that already one free month. So it gives you plenty of time to get your listings in there, get connected, seamless integration between PriceLabs and Feather, see what your rates are, start collecting some of that data so you're prepared to have those tough conversations, and hopefully it makes those conversations a little bit easier, a little less tough. Let's see. Anyone has any questions? I've not seen anything come through. Quinn, was there anything else that you wanted to share that we didn't get to cover? Doesn't look like we have any questions just yet.
Just want to make myself available to anybody else that might have some stuff that they're running across at their business. I'm sure that I have probably dealt with the same issue or same unruly guest or homeowner. So let me know how I can make myself available, and I'd love to connect.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you. Well, if we don't have any questions, I'll hang on for a couple of minutes just to see if any come through. Otherwise, we can finish up just a couple minutes early. Thank you. And we will be sending out this recording. So just know you'll get the recording of this call. You can then share it with your team. People, like I said, probably still clearing out their inbox from the holiday weekend, or your properties were just nuts after the holiday, people celebrating, barbecuing, spilling stuff everywhere. And so you can share that with your team if they weren't able to make it.
Well, I really appreciate it, Carrie.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. You have a good one. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.